Welcome. Be sure to like and subscribe for more scary stories, or I will come for you. Story number 1. The Hangman by the Curator. It all started a few months ago when I first met that jerk, Brad. He was a few years older than me and went to the same high school, but he was in the grade above. From the moment I laid eyes on him, I knew he was trouble. There was just something about the way he carried himself. Arrogant, entitled, like he owned the whole damn school. It didn't take long for him to single me out and start bullying me. At first, it was just little things, like bumping into me in the hallway or knocking my books out of my hands. But then it escalated. He started shoving me, shouting insults at me in front of everyone. I tried to stand up to him, but the guy was massive compared to me. There was no way I could fight back. My parents told me to just ignore him, that if I didn't react, it would stop. But it didn't. The bullying just got worse and worse. Brad would wait for me after school and beat me up. I came home with bruises and bloody noses more times than I can count. I begged my parents to do something, to talk to the school or call the police. But they just said I needed to toughen up, that I was letting Brad get to me. They had no idea how terrified I was, how much I dreaded going to school every day. Then one day, my best friend Ethan told me about something he had discovered on the dark web. Apparently, there were these websites where you could hire, well, hitmen. I couldn't believe it at first. I thought Ethan was just messing with me, but he swore it was real, and he even showed me one of the sites. It was called the Hangman, and it had a plain, minimalist design. Just a simple black background with white text. There was a form where you could input details about your target and your payment information. Ethan said the prices were pretty steep, but that the service was supposed to be reliable. I couldn't stop thinking about it. As the bullying continued, the idea of hiring someone to take care of Brad started to become more and more tempting. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was illegal, but I was desperate. I felt so powerless, so afraid all the time, and my parents didn't seem to care. So one night, when my parents were asleep, I snuck onto the computer and pulled up the site. With shaking hands, I filled out the target details. Brad's name, age, school, and a physical description. Then I attached a photo I had surreptitiously taken of him. For the payment, I used some of the Bitcoin I'd been saving up from doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. I couldn't believe I was actually going through with this. My heart was pounding the whole time, terrified that my parents would catch me. But I kept telling myself that Brad had this coming, that he deserved it for all the pain he had caused me. After I hit submit, I sat there staring at the screen, wondering if anything would actually happen. Ethan had said the sites were legit, but I had a hard time believing it. A week went by, and nothing changed. Brad was still at school, still tormenting me every chance he got. Then, one day, he didn't show up. I noticed it right away. His usual spot in the cafeteria was empty, and he wasn't in any of our shared classes. I tried not to get my hopes up, but a part of me wondered, could it be? The next day, when I arrived at school, there was a huge commotion. Police cars and fire trucks were all over the place, sirens blaring. Students were gathered in clusters, whispering and pointing. I pushed my way through the crowd, heart racing, and that's when I saw it. Brad's lifeless body hanging from the clock tower, a rope noose around his neck. I stood there, stunned, staring up at the gruesome sight. Part of me was horrified, but another part of me felt a strange sense of relief. The bullying was over. Brad could never hurt me again. In the days that followed, the police investigated Brad's death. They determined it was a suicide, though the exact circumstances were unclear. No one knew why he had done it. As for me, I kept my head down, trying not to draw any attention to myself. I was terrified that somehow they would figure out what I had done. But the truth is, I can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Brad got what was coming to him. And now, whenever I think about using that dark web service again, I can't help but wonder, who else deserves to be taken care of? I know it was wrong, what I did. Hiring someone to kill Brad, even if he was a total jerk, is messed up. I should have just told the school, or my parents, or the police. But I was so scared, so desperate to make the bullying stop. And now, I have to live with the consequences. Sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by the image of Brad's body swinging from the clock tower. I wonder if the cops will ever figure it out. I worry that someone will come after me, seek revenge for what I've done. And then there are the other times, when I find myself staring at that dark website, my finger hovering over the submit button. Because the truth is, I'm starting to think that maybe Brad wasn't the only one who deserved it. Maybe there are other people out there who need to be taken care of as well. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't even be considering it. But the temptation is there, lurking in the back of my mind. And the more I think about it, the more I wonder, how far am I willing to go to make sure I'm never bullied again? I guess only time will tell. All I know is I can't stop thinking about that website, about the services they offer. And a part of me is starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I'll end up using them again. Because, in the end, isn't it worth it to feel safe and free from fear? Isn't it worth it to make sure no one ever hurts me again? It's been a few months now since Brad's death, and I still can't shake the feeling that I did the right thing. I know it was wrong, that I should have found another way to deal with the bullying. But a part of me still feels like Brad got what was coming to him. So who knows? Maybe I'll end up using that service again. Maybe I won't. All I know is the temptation is there, and it's not going away anytime soon. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that I'm not the only one out there who's been through something like this. Maybe there are others out there who are just as desperate and just as willing to take matters into their own hands. Maybe, if we all banded together, we could make a real difference. Maybe we could put an end to bullying once and for all. I guess I'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime, I'll keep thinking about it, weighing the pros and cons, because the truth is, the temptation is always there. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that I might not be the only one out there who's willing to take that risk. Story number 2, The Devil's Inn, by the Curator. This is the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. I'm still shaking from it all, and I don't know if I'll ever be the same again. But I have to tell someone. I have to get this off my chest. I hope that by sharing my story, maybe it will help me process what happened, or at least warn others so they don't end up in the same nightmare I found myself in. It all started about 8 months ago. I was working a dead-end job at a small accounting firm, totally hating my life. My boss, Mr. Hawkins, was the worst. He was always verbally abusing me, putting me down, and making my life a living hell. I would dread going into work every single day, dreading having to interact with that horrible man. One day, I was venting to my friend Rob about how much I despised my job and my boss. Rob had heard me complain about it a million times before, but this time he said something that really caught my attention. You know, there are ways you could get back at him. Ways to make him pay for all the crap he's put you through. I was intrigued. What do you mean? Well, have you ever heard of hiring a hitman on the dark web? Rob said, hesitantly. I was shocked. A hitman? You mean, like, to kill someone? Rob nodded slowly. Yeah, man. I've heard it's actually pretty easy to do. There are all sorts of websites on the dark web where you can hire professional killers to take care of your problems. For the right price, of course. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. The thought of actually having someone killed was abhorrent to me. It was the most evil, unthinkable thing I could imagine doing. But at the same time, I couldn't deny that a small part of me was tempted. Mr. Hawkins had made my life a living hell for years, and he deserved to pay for all the pain and suffering he had caused me. Maybe this was my chance to finally get justice. I don't know, Rob, I said hesitantly. Isn't that, illegal? Rob shrugged. I mean, yeah, obviously. But desperate times call for desperate measures, right? If this guy is really making your life that miserable, maybe it's worth considering. I thought about it for a long time. The idea of hiring a hitman both horrified and intrigued me. On one hand, I knew it was wrong, and that I could never live with the guilt of being responsible for someone's death. But on the other hand, the thought of getting revenge on Mr. Hawkins and finally being free of his torment was incredibly tempting. In the end, my desire for revenge won out. I told Rob that I wanted to do it, and he said he would help me find a suitable website on the dark web. A few days later, he came back to me with a link to a site called The Devil's Inn. This place has a reputation for being legit, Rob told me. They've got all sorts of skilled killers available for hire. All you have to do is submit a request, and they'll match you with someone who can get the job done. I stared at the link, my heart pounding. I couldn't believe I was actually considering this. And you really think this will work? I mean, won't I get caught or something? Rob shook his head. Nah, man. These guys are professionals. They know how to cover their tracks. As long as you don't leave any evidence linking you to it, you'll be in the clear. I took a deep breath. Okay, I'm going to do it. I clicked on the link and was taken to a dark, foreboding-looking website. There was no fancy design or graphics, just a plain text interface with fields to fill out. I quickly typed in the details of what I needed. A hit on my boss, Mr. Hawkins. I provided his name, address, and a description of his daily routine and habits. After submitting the request, I was promptly contacted by a user called the Reaper. They told me that they were the perfect person for the job, and that it would be completed within 7 days. All I had to do was pay a fee of 0.5 Bitcoin, which at the time was about $20,000. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. This was really happening. I was actually going to have someone murdered. I felt sick to my stomach, but the thought of finally being free of Mr. Hawkins' abuse was overpowering. I told the Reaper that I would pay the fee, and they responded that the job would be done by the end of the week. Over the next few days, I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I could barely even function. I kept imagining the grisly details of what was about to happen, Mr. Hawkins being gunned down in cold blood, or perhaps having his throat slit. I knew I should back out, that I was making a terrible mistake. But the thought of continuing to endure my boss's torment was too much to bear. On the 7th day, I went into work as usual, bracing myself for what might happen. But everything seemed normal. Mr. Hawkins was his usual horrible self, berating and belittling me in front of the whole office. I went home that night, feeling both relieved and uneasy. Had the hit been called off? Had the Reaper failed? The next morning, I got a call from the office. Mr. Hawkins hadn't shown up for work. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was this it? Had my horrible plan actually succeeded? I hurried into the office, trying to act normal. When I got there, the place was in chaos. The police were swarming the building, and my co-workers were all gathered in the lobby, whispering in hushed, terrified tones. I walked up to one of them, trying to act casual. "What's going on?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "Where's Mr. Hawkins?" The co-worker looked at me, eyes wide with fear. "Didn't you hear? Mr. Hawkins was found dead this morning." I felt my stomach lurch. This was really happening. My boss was dead, and I was responsible. I hurried to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before vomiting violently. I sat there, shaking uncontrollably, as the gravity of what I had done began to sink in. I had hired a hitman to murder my boss, and now he was dead in the most gruesome way imaginable. I had never wanted this, never wanted anyone to actually get hurt. But my thirst for revenge had blinded me, and now an innocent life had been taken. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, barely able to concentrate on anything. The police questioned all of us, trying to figure out what had happened. Of course, I gave them no indication that I was involved. How could I? I was terrified of being caught and going to prison. In the days that followed, the investigation into Mr. Hawkins' murder intensified. The police were perplexed, as there seemed to be no clear motive or suspect. I lived in constant fear, jumping at every knock on the door or phone call, convinced that I was about to be arrested. But as the days turned into weeks, the investigation seemed to stall. The police had no leads, and the case began to go cold. I started to allow myself to relax, to hope that I had somehow gotten away with it. That is, until the 8th day after Mr. Hawkins' death. I arrived at the office that morning, bracing myself for another round of questioning from the police. But when I got there, the scene that greeted me was unlike anything I could have imagined. Mr. Hawkins' body was tied to the front door of the office, covered in stab wounds and mutilated beyond recognition. His organs were spilling out, a macabre display of the brutality that had been inflicted upon him. I stood there, frozen in horror, as my co-workers screamed and scattered in terror. The police were called, and the entire office was shut down as they began a frantic new investigation. I don't know how I made it through that day. I was a mess, barely able to function as the reality of what had happened sank in. Someone had taken revenge on Mr. Hawkins, and they had done it in the most horrific way imaginable. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was no random act of violence. The killer had clearly gone to great lengths to send a message, to make sure that Mr. Hawkins' brutal death was as public and traumatic as possible. The police questioned all of us again, but this time their focus seemed to be on me. They knew that I had a history of conflict with Mr. Hawkins, and they were clearly suspicious. I did my best to act innocent, but I could feel the noose tightening around my neck. Eventually, the police zeroed in on a lead. They had discovered that Mr. Hawkins had been killed with a very specific type of knife, one that was extremely rare and difficult to obtain. And guess what? That same type of knife had been stolen from the office just a few weeks prior. I knew then that it was only a matter of time before they connected the dots and realized that I was the one who had orchestrated this entire thing. I was terrified, consumed by a level of guilt and fear that I had never experienced before. In the end, the police did manage to track down the person who had carried out the hit. A skilled and ruthless assassin known only as the Reaper. They arrested him, and he eventually confessed to the entire gruesome plot. But to my horror, he also revealed that he had been hired by someone else. Someone who had a deep, personal grudge against Mr. Hawkins. And that someone, of course, was me. I was arrested, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, and thrown in jail. As I sit here, awaiting my trial, I am consumed by the weight of what I have done. I never wanted anyone to get hurt, never imagined that things would spiral so out of control. But my thirst for revenge blinded me, and now an innocent man is dead, and I am facing the consequences of my actions. I don't know what's going to happen to me, or if I'll ever be able to make amends for the horrible thing I've done. All I know is that I'm haunted by the memory of Mr. Hawkins' mutilated body, and the knowledge that I am ultimately responsible for his brutal death. It's a weight that I will have to carry for the rest of my life, a burden that I can never escape. I hope that by sharing my story, I can serve as a warning to others that the thirst for revenge can lead to the darkest of deeds, and that the consequences can be truly devastating. No matter how much someone may have wronged you, taking a life is never the answer. The guilt and the pain will haunt you forever. I just wish I had realized that sooner. Maybe then, none of this would have ever happened. Story number 3, The Angel's Gift, by the Curator. It was just supposed to be another unboxing video for my YouTube channel. I had spent a good amount of money on this mystery box, so I was really hoping it would be something cool. I had been doing these dark web unboxing videos for a while now, and had built up a decent following of over 100,000 subscribers. People just seemed to love watching me open up these weird and mysterious packages that I ordered from the shadier corners of the internet. I had started the channel a couple years ago as a bit of a joke, to be honest. I was just a bored 23-year-old working a dead-end retail job, looking for a way to make some extra cash. I had always been fascinated by the strange world of the dark web, and figured I could use that to generate some content. I started small, ordering a few cheap mystery boxes here and there and filming myself opening them on camera. To my surprise, the videos started getting a decent amount of views and likes. People seemed to really get a kick out of watching my reactions as I discovered the bizarre and sometimes disturbing contents. As the channel grew, I started investing more money into the mystery boxes, searching for the most expensive and intriguing ones I could find. That's how I came across the Angel's Gift, an item listed on one of the darknet markets I frequented with a price tag of $5,000. It was by far the most I had ever spent on one of these packages, but the description had me completely hooked. It claimed the box contained an artifact from the angelic realm that would grant the owner special gifts and abilities. Of course, I had to have it. The package took about a week to arrive, which was agonizing. I could hardly sleep, constantly wondering what kind of incredible, otherworldly item was going to be inside. When the nondescript brown box finally showed up at my doorstep, I immediately set up my camera equipment and got ready to film the unboxing. I carefully sliced open the packaging tape and slowly lifted the flaps, peering inside. At first, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, just some crumpled up brown paper for packing material. As I began removing the paper, though, I noticed there was something metallic glinting underneath. Intrigued, I pulled it out, and that's when things started to get really weird. It appeared to be some kind of mechanical device, a small, intricate-looking contraption made of shiny metal parts. There were gears and sprockets and all sorts of strange components I couldn't even begin to identify. And in the center of it all was a small glass vial filled with a cloudy, iridescent liquid. I stared at the bizarre object for a moment, completely bewildered. What the hell was this thing? I carefully examined it, turning it over in my hands, trying to figure out how it worked. As I was inspecting it, I noticed a small piece of paper tucked into the side of the box. I pulled it out and unfolded it, reading the handwritten message. "You will be with the angels soon, friend. Thank you for your purchase." The words sent a chill down my spine. What did that even mean? Was this some kind of sick joke? My heart started to race as a wave of unease washed over me. I quickly set the mysterious device down on the table in front of me, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, without warning, the machine whirred to life. The gears and sprockets began spinning rapidly, and the glass vial in the center started to vibrate. Before I could even react, a fine mist began spraying out from the device, shooting directly into my face. I let out a shocked cry and instinctively jerked my head back, but it was too late. I felt the mist hitting my eyes and nose and immediately began coughing and sputtering. The substance had a strong, pungent odor that burned my nostrils. My eyes started to water and sting, and I frantically waved my hand in front of my face, trying to clear the air. After a few moments, the machine powered down and fell silent. I sat there, coughing and blinking, trying to clear my vision. What the hell just happened? Had that thing seriously just sprayed me with some kind of liquid? My heart was pounding in my chest as a growing sense of panic began to set in. I quickly looked around the room, trying to locate my phone so I could call for help. But as I scanned the area, my eyes landed on the note that had been inside the box. The words, "You will be with the angels soon," my friend, were now etched into my mind, filling me with a sense of dread. Without a moment's hesitation, I grabbed the mysterious device and hurled it into the trash can, desperate to get it as far away from me as possible. Then I rushed over to the sink, splashing water onto my face and rubbing my eyes, trying to flush out whatever had been sprayed into them. As I stood there, hunched over the sink, I started to feel a strange, tingling sensation spreading through my body. It wasn't painful, exactly, but it was deeply unsettling. I glanced back over at the trash can, half expecting to see the device somehow reactivating and spraying me again. I waited anxiously for several minutes, but nothing else happened. My eyes and nose had stopped burning, and the tingling sensation was starting to fade. Cautiously, I dried my face off and moved back to the table, staring down at the bizarre machine I had just discarded. What was that thing? And what did that note mean? Was it some kind of prank? Or was it something far more sinister? I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. It was as if a dark cloud had suddenly descended, casting a foreboding shadow over the entire room. I glanced around nervously, half expecting to see some kind of ominous figure lurking in the corners. After a few more minutes of anxious pacing, I decided I needed to call the authorities. This was way beyond anything I felt equipped to handle on my own. I reached for my phone, but as I was about to dial 911, I froze. What if this was all just some kind of weird misunderstanding? What if the device was actually harmless and I was overreacting? I didn't want to cause a big scene if it turned out to be nothing. I mean, I had ordered this thing from the dark web. Who knows what kind of crazy stuff might be out there? Maybe this was all just part of some twisted prank. I stood there, phone in hand, torn between calling for help and trying to rationalize the situation. In the end, I decided to wait it out a bit longer, see if anything else happened. I sat back down in front of the camera, which was still recording, and tried to steady my nerves. Hey guys, I said, looking directly at the lens. So, something really weird just happened. I don't even know what to make of it. I proceeded to explain what had just occurred. describing the bizarre device and the chilling note that had come with it. "I'm not sure what to do here," I continued, my voice wavering slightly. I mean, I flushed my eyes out, and I seemed to be okay for now, but I don't know. You guys, this feels off. Something doesn't feel right. I pause, chewing on my lip nervously. I think I'm just going to keep an eye on things for now, see if anything else happens. I'll keep you all posted. In the meantime, if anyone has any idea what the hell that thing was or what that note meant, please let me know. I could really use some help figuring this out. With that, I ended the video and uploaded it to my channel. Within minutes, the comments started pouring in, with viewers expressing a mix of concern and morbid curiosity. Some speculated that it was all just an elaborate hoax, while others were convinced that I was in real danger. I tried my best to respond to as many comments as I could, assuring everyone that I was okay for the time being. But the truth was, I was starting to feel pretty unsettled myself. That tingling sensation had come and gone, but there was an underlying unease that refused to go away. Over the next few hours, I continued to monitor myself for any signs of illness or strange symptoms. But aside from a slight headache, I seemed to be fine. Maybe it really was just a prank, after all. I began to breathe a little easier, convincing myself that I was overreacting. That is, until the next morning, when I woke up feeling absolutely terrible. I stumbled out of bed, my head pounding and my body aching all over. I shuffled to the bathroom, catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My skin was pale and clammy, and my eyes were bloodshot and sunken. I felt nauseous and dizzy, like I was about to pass out. Panic surged through me as I frantically tried to remember what had happened the previous day. The unboxing, the strange device, the ominous note. It all came rushing back. Had that mist that had been sprayed in my face actually been something dangerous? Was I now suffering the effects of some kind of toxin or chemical? I stumbled back to my bed, collapsing onto the mattress. I needed to call for help, but I could barely muster the energy to reach for my phone. As I lay there, shivering and sweating, I started to cough uncontrollably. Thick, gooey phlegm was building up in my throat, making it hard to breathe. With a growing sense of dread, I realized that this was only the beginning. Whatever had been in that mist, it was clearly starting to take its toll on my body. I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was in serious trouble. Summoning what little strength I had left, I reached for my phone and began recording a video. I needed to document this, to capture what was happening to me in case the worst happened. "Guys," I croak, my voice barely audible. "Something is really wrong. I woke up this morning and I feel awful. I think that thing I opened yesterday, it did something to me." I broke into another coughing fit, struggling to catch my breath. I don't know what's going on, but I'm really sick. I'm gonna try to get to the hospital, but I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. With that, I ended the video and posted it to my channel, praying that someone would see it and come to my aid. I lay there, shivering and coughing, as the minutes ticked by. The symptoms only seemed to be getting worse. My body was racked with violent tremors, and every cough brought up more thick, bloody phlegm. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to summon the strength to call an ambulance. The operator on the other end of the line sounded concerned as I tried to explain my situation. She promised help was on the way, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. As I waited for the paramedics to arrive, I started to panic. What if I didn't make it? What if this was it, the end of the line? I thought about my family, my friends, all the people who cared about me. I didn't want to die. Not like this. Not from some mysterious illness caused by a dark web purchase gone wrong. The sound of sirens in the distance snapped me out of my morbid thoughts, and I forced myself to focus on the present. Help was coming. I just had to hold on a little longer. I could do this. I had to. But as the paramedics rushed into my apartment and began examining me, I could see the worry on their faces. They quickly hooked me up to an IV and started administering various medications, but their efforts seemed to have little effect. If anything, I was only getting worse. The ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and disorientation. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my body racked with violent convulsions. The medical staff worked frantically, but I could tell they were struggling to figure out what was wrong with me. When we finally arrived at the emergency room, I was rushed into the intensive care unit. Doctors and nurses swarmed around me, running a battery of tests and trying various treatments. But no matter what they did, my condition only seemed to deteriorate. As I lay there, struggling to breathe, I couldn't help but think about that ominous note, "You will be with the angels soon, my friend." Was this it? Was I really going to die from whatever had been in that mist? The thought filled me with a sense of pure terror. Over the next few days, my condition only worsened. The doctors were baffled, unable to determine the exact cause of my illness. All they knew was that I was suffering from a rapidly progressing, life-threatening condition that they had never seen before. My followers, meanwhile, had been closely following my ordeal. The video I had posted had gone viral, with thousands of concerned comments and shares. Many were speculating that I had been poisoned, while others were convinced that it was all some kind of hoax. But as my health continued to deteriorate, and the medical staff struggled to find a cure, it became clear that this was no mere prank. Something was seriously wrong, and my life was hanging by a thread. Finally, after a week of intense treatment and observation, the doctors made a startling discovery. The substance that had been sprayed into my face was, in fact, a highly toxic compound known as ricin. It was a potent poison derived from castor beans, and it was causing my body to systematically shut down. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. Ricin. And who had deliberately sent it to me with the intention of killing me? As I lay there, struggling to comprehend the gravity of the situation, the doctors informed me that my condition was only going to continue to worsen. The ricin was slowly destroying my organs, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I was going to die, and there was no way to reverse the process. I couldn't believe it. This was really happening. I was actually going to die, all because I had the misguided curiosity to open some random dark web package. The realization was utterly devastating, and I found myself consumed by a mix of terror, rage, and profound sorrow. In my final days, my YouTube channel became a bizarre, real-time documentation of my deteriorating health. Viewers watched in horror as I gradually succumbed to the effects of the ricin poisoning, my body racked by convulsions and coughing up blood. It was a gruesome, tragic spectacle that no one could have ever predicted. And in the end, the chilling words of that ominous note proved to be all too true. I was indeed with the angels soon. As the ricin did its devastating work, I slipped away, my life snuffed out in the most horrific way imaginable. It's a cautionary tale, really a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadowy corners of the internet. I was just a curious, adventure-seeking young man, and it cost me my life. So please, learn from my mistake. Don't go poking around in places you don't belong. You never know what kind of dark forces you might end up unleashing. And if you do happen to come across something as sinister as the angel's gift, for the love of God, leave it alone. Because the angels aren't always as benevolent as they might seem. This is the Curator. I hope you've enjoyed today's scary stories. Until next time.